We just watched each other's films for the first time, I'll just say that, and we both watched it on laptops,
That's true.
unfortunately. But like still I was so impacted by it. So yeah, where do you want to start?
I mean, I don't know. I'm just gonna like fanboy out for a second though, because I feel like I've been crushing on you from afar for some time. Like actually, it was Sofia Supercasso, our editor for Dina and our previous film Mala Mala, who's a mutual friend
Yeah,
of ours. She
an incredible editor.
for Mala Mala, she actually suggested watching Bombay Beach, and this is in 2012, 2013.
Yeah, that's like a year or two after it came out.
So that was like the first time that I had really encountered your work without knowing anything about you or what the film was about even, and I found it and I watched it, and it's cool to then watch this film as well, LoveTrue, because you have this way about what you do that to me it's very mystical. To me it's like borderline like a poetry film in a way. I feel like loose always has a negative connotation, but it's free. Like it's like liberated work, and I really like it. So I'm just gonna probably kiss your ass for like the next like 90 minutes. Cause no, I think like you're I mean we're focusing on love, right? So
Yes. Thank you.
no, but like there are many. I don't think there are many people who are as courageous to be working within the genre. I feel like people always think of confines and like the limitations when we talk about documentary, and it's cool to see someone else, because I think that we try to do that too, to be pushing back against those boundaries a bit, or breaking them or ignoring them entirely.
Yeah. I really felt when I watched your film like such a crazy feeling in a way to me, because I think a lot of how we use language in film, there's so many subconscious messages that we send as filmmakers, just by how we hold the camera or like a certain setup that signals to the viewers things that they don't even think about. I don't know that I knew that before I made films, but actually once I started making documentaries I noticed it more, where just the simplest example that I think anybody can relate to is that when we see usually like a talking head at a film, like we assume it's true, like it's journalism or it's reality, or if we see something on a, like that feels like journalism, we assume it's true, but then if we see something that has music on it or that is like kind of a scene between people when they don't look into the camera, we assume it's scripted. So there's like all these assumptions that I think we subconsciously make when we watch a documentary, and obviously now it's very interesting to speak about how we also make those assumptions when we consume news, and the reason that everything this festival stands for has never been more relevant. I feel like this idea of what's true and what's false, both in documentary filmmaking and in journalism. Is it the intention of the filmmaker and the relationship that he has with the subjects and with the concept of truth, or is it really just how he holds the camera and the form? Because so many people get caught up in the form.
For sure.
And attribute these ideas of truth to the form. Like if you were a fly on the wall, then you're telling the truth. If you interfered, then you're lying. And we know as filmmakers that it has nothing to do with it, because there's so many people that do interviews and talking heads and whatever, verite, and they are so manipulative and care nothing, I think, about the truth. There's so much more about creating a film that will capture the audience and lead them in the way they want them to go. And then there's so many people that are much more emotional or artistic or take liberties with the form, and they're actually so committed to their subjects. And I felt watching your film like such a commitment to the story and the characters. It was really touching, and I don't know if people here saw Dina, but you have to watch it because it's really one of the best character studies I've seen, and it's there's a lot of things I would love to talk about that are really like actually questions that came up to me when I was watching it. I don't know if that's something you wanna do, but I'm very open.
Real quick too, I guess, if we take a step back, I guess my one question for you is how do you relate to genre? How do you think about genre? Like even using the word documentary, like is that complicated for you?
I think that in general, this idea, this binary idea, right, of like true, false.
It's antithetical to everything that we're trying to do in general.
Documentary, fiction, like this division, all the time, and trying to fit into one thing or one box is, definitely to me not an idea that comes from art. Like it comes from the need to categorize things for selling them or to fit them into like a category in a festival.
For bureaucratic reasons.
Yeah, it's very bureaucratic. A very good way of saying it. So I definitely don't look at it that way. I kind of set out to make a film and find a way that would satisfy me creatively and the characters, and I feel like has brought us together to tell the story. At the same time, now after making 2 films, and dealing with the relationships that it brings with my subjects.
Because they extend far beyond the film.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. That actually brings me as a filmmaker to ask more questions, brought me as a filmmaker to ask more questions about, that I see a lot of documentary filmmakers deal with that are moral. Let's say, where I feel like as a narrative filmmaker, maybe those moral questions bother you less sometimes. So that is definitely something that I do see as a difference, a big difference, between making a film that you wrote, you paid everybody to be in it, and that's it. Like there's no questions asked, everybody signed a contract.
And does their job.
Yeah.
It seems like the reason why both of us play with genre, and I don't think it's because we're trying to like be different and like just experiment just for the sake of it. I think it's because there is a commitment to truth, and then you just have to find the best way of expressing that truth. So sometimes the tool, that is a convention may not be the best tool. And I think it just naturally then, because when I watch your movie, and my main question that I kept thinking was like, what is this movie about? Is it about love, or is it, to me, which is what I wanted to ask you was, for me it was about death, and it was about almost like how you took all these people's stories as almost primary material and weaved it into almost your own philosophy of death and life. Because at a lot of moments, there's always this like, it's almost like, for me, there was like the scene, and then there was like the ... that kept happening with music or light, or there's always alluding to something that wasn't there in the movie. Like the scene is always pointing to a different dimension. And I felt like a lot of films, our film for example, was trying to do the opposite. It was very much trying to be in the moment, record the present, and just appreciate that present state. Our film is not trying to be poetic. It's trying to not be poetic, so that you could just experience that. It's trying to be clinical almost.
Yeah.
And yours is, I feel like, the complete opposite, and it's always pointing at something else that's not in the frame.
Right.
Like you think it's about the boy and his bones, but it's, or you think it's about this girl and this stripper, but it's like somehow the older stripper is kind of her mom, and it's kind of maybe a symbol of her, and it's all these other things, and so I wanted to ask you that, what is it about for you?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate what you said about, because when I watched your film, I felt like this weird through the glass mirror, like through the mirror, looking at something. Like I was like, oh my God, we both like came to do a film about love, but from such different approaches. And usually when I watch films like that, I have to say that I don't connect so much to films sometimes, for instance, that are on a tripod. Like I get this like instinct knee-jerk reaction where I'm just like, okay, I don't know how long I can see
So
it.
I'm gonna be boring.
Sophia calls it the monkeys.
Yeah, I like that. I love that
Did you
expression.
get the monkeys? Yeah, I love when she says that.
The monkeys are like when you're embarrassed, but for someone else.
Yeah, like-
for someone else's kind of misfortune and
Or like
ignorance.
irritation, yeah, like
Right.
kind of.
But there's something that irks you, but you just don't know. It just makes you feel monkeys.
Yeah.
on your skin.
Yeah, and then, but I have actually gotten into it so much to the point that it made me like rethink a lot of things that I do, like a lot of decisions I make and stuff like that. So it was really beautiful, especially in what I would call that part that is the heart of your film. To me, those two scenes around before and after when you discover what happened to Dina, like.
Mm.
I really wanted to ask you about it later if we can, but yeah, I think that my film for me is definitely in general, like you said, I do the opposite of being clinical probably, because I believe in general that symbolism is such a big part of our existence, you know, and I feel like each one of us dreams at night, which is an amazing thing. Like we sleep a third of our lives. Like how
Right.
crazy is that? And like we spend so much of our time dreaming and like seeing things that our minds trying to make sense of, and then some of it like we kind of take notice of or understand, and some of it we're just like whatever. I wake up hungry and my cereal is finished and who cares? Like, but still, it's such a big part of our lives, and like I feel that to me, love is in many ways also an exercise many times in symbolism, like because we have. Each one of us have things that we are kind of going through and working out, you know.
You mean
obviously.
individually?
Individually.
Yeah.
But then ultimately we also all as a species go through this cycle of life-death, right? All the time. Not just like once when we are born and once when we die. It's just like everything in our lives always is like living and dying, and like our bodies are changing.
Beginning and ending.
Yeah, and we're aging, and like relationships we have, and every day starts with the sunrise and ends with the sunset, and like everything all the time is like being born and dies, and like the things we eat and the fruits we buy rot and the flowers we get, like we're just constantly in this state, you know. And I feel like love is something that kind of is always sort of kind of in, you know, passing through that and traveling through that, and allows us in many ways to the kind of love and relationships we attract allows us to see what is it that really we are dreaming about. Like what is it that we are dealing with that we don't touch, that we can't see, you know what I mean? What is it that we just kind of cast in a way, and the film is a lot about that, like performance in a documentary, but also performance in love, like how we cast people in a way, you know, because they mean something to us, and then we fall in love with them, and at a certain point we understand they're not actually necessarily what they thought they are, and we start to see the person,
Or who we wanted them to be.
yeah, or who we wanted them to be, and so yeah, so I think the film is about all of those things, you know, like love as moving away from seeing love just as a romantic story that starts at A, goes through this and this, ends at happily ever after, or ends at failure. And
Right,
like instead
right.
of it seeing love as a state of being that we search for all the time as we are dealing with life and death. Being born, searching for it, searching to be loved, searching to learn how to love, and then never ends. Like just like kind of this constant cycle.
I guess the surprise element in your movie because they kept changing everything. So you always like something new is happening. It's always actually an ending.
Mm-hmm.
All the time something ends, and it's jarring because you commit to, because you have like the what I don't know what to say, I don't want to use these words, but I'll just use them, like the real scenes, and then you have the recreations and the poetry, then you feel like you're spending way more time than you actually are with them. So by the time that things end, it's really jarring. Like when you realize that the blonde boy, surfer boy's life is a complete illusion, it's really jarring because you've just spent like 20 minutes believing the complete opposite. And you really, I feel like, identify with him. You're like, oh, okay, this is his ending. And then at the end, when the boy left the girl, the stripper, you're like, oh my god, like all these kids, and you just feel so like, you don't feel bad for them because you identify, but you're like, yeah, it is just what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like each one of those people, like, and it's to bring it back to your film, like Dina is the same way. Like she really had to go through a literal death in a way of her idea of love and of love itself.
And her love
she almost died physically when she had to come to terms with it. I don't know if you feel okay with me saying for a second what happened, or you can tell me.
I think it's fine. Yeah.
Do you want to tell people, like,
I think you should.
I mean, it's just such an incredible film because you follow this woman, Dina, who has a beautiful relationship with a man who's he's autistic. Is she autistic too?
She's been given that diagnosis.
Right.
They've called her autistic, Tourette's, OCD, and PTSD from the attack.
Right. But she seems like, kind of, you're not really sure where she is on the spectrum, like as they say.
But she's not medicated anymore, so
okay.
In a way you could say that she doesn't have anything.
Asperger, perhaps.
Asperger's isn't a diagnosis anymore.
And that's also a
in
form of
DSM.
autism too, basically, no? Asperger.
Right, but it's not diagnosed anymore. So the thing about autism is like, it's something that's in constant evolution.
Yeah.
It didn't exist as autism spectrum disorder 30 years ago.
Right.
Like Dina was PDD-NOS until the 80s.
Which is what?
I forget the first three letters, but it's basically PDD and then not otherwise specified.
Oh.
So it's essentially just a diagnosis that they were giving to people where there was no diagnosis to give.
Yeah, I really like that you don't explain it, by the way, in the film. Like, it's such an important thing, I think, to see people for who they are and not through some diagnosis.
Well, she's been working her whole life to just be Dina.
Yeah.
So it was so fucked for us to be like, and this is what, call her a name that she doesn't want to be called.
Yeah.
Well, and in 20 years, like, it might be called something very different. So
Yeah.
it's like who Dina is, and
Yeah.
like her journey is much more eternal than what
Yeah.
we use, the words that we use to describe her.
Yeah.
The clinical, medicalized version of who she is.
Yeah.
We
We much prefer calling her eccentric or zany because
Right.
it just is more her personality and less calling her sick.
And it's so loaded too, it's like typically we think of people on the spectrum very reductively, it's kind of like, oh, well then they can't, we make all these assumptions about what they might not be able to do, when in actuality, like she's an incredibly brave person. I would say braver than I am, and Scott, who, she calls like lower functioning than her, has this like
the only time they
incredible-
refer to as the word autism even comes up is when she calls him. She says, I don't know if this is because of your autism
Right.
or something else, because
Right.
she has low sexual kind of impulse.
Right.
Sort of.
Well, and he refers to himself as Aspie too,
Oh, okay.
because he still very much identifies with like the Asperger diagnosis.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it's like she refers to him as lower functioning, but for me, it's like in the film there's this moment where he literally names like 4 operatic tenors.
Oh yeah. He's,
Back to back.
Yeah, he's incredible.
And it's always awesome to be in the audience no matter where you are, because I don't think anyone in the audience can name a 5th, but Scott could. And like that's like, so he has like these intelligencies, he possesses these intelligencies that I'll never have. Like,
Oh yeah.
you can be like Scott, like, what was like the number 4 top 10 hit from 1973 in March.
Yeah.
And he knows, and he
Yeah.
knows what track it's on in the album, and he knows who was in the band, and like he's
also
so
very conscious
passionate.
socially and psychologically, and like he's very aware of her and
He's
her
always listening.
struggle as a woman and as an individual,
Totally.
like just like a very educated,
Yeah.
self-conscious man. And she's about to marry him, and we kind of follow their relationship, and then at a very interesting point in the film, you suddenly realize that there's you realize through the whole thing, maybe there's something in her past, but at a very specific point in the film, you understand that she had a very traumatic experience in her prior relationship, that where she was attacked and stabbed by her boyfriend and almost died. And there is a recording of her boyfriend calling the police to confess that he just stabbed her all over her body, and she's bleeding and dying in front of him, basically. And she's asking him if she's going to die or live, and the police is kind of like holding him on the line until they reach the house to save her. And you hear the whole recording. And from the time he calls to confess it until the police breaks through the doors. So it's about, how many minutes? I don't know, like maybe 5 minutes?
Something like that.
And it all plays over them right after they had a very intimate conversation sitting on a bench in the sunset, and they leave the bench, and then you just stay on this shot until the sun goes down into darkness and hear that conversation. And to me, that moment was really one of the most memorable, maybe, moments of cinema that I've seen. Like, I'll never forget it. It was like such an incredible decision. And
Maybe that's the one poetic part of the movie.
it was very poetic. And I was going to ask
Maybe
you.
that's what we
That's
broke.
true.
Maybe we broke.
Yeah,
We
because I
broke.
feel like your
Right.
film was poetic in that, and also clinical. It
Without
wasn't one
intentionally doing it. I mean, like they're very poetic people. You know,
Yeah.
we were talking to Q&A earlier this morning, and like it's like right before that moment happens, Scott tells her like, if I had been through what you had been through,
Mhm.
or if anyone else had been through what you'd been through, they would have possibly perished by now.
Yeah.
And like that's Shakespearean.
Yeah, he's amazing.
You know, like no one uses the word perish anymore.
Oh no, he's so well.
You know, and same with Dina. She has these gorgeous moments where she's holding the joy of sex, which she gives to him to kind of encourage him, yeah, to like figure out what he wants. And she's like looking at the cover and she says like, you know, I've had the experience of lovemaking. And to me, like that line is like,
Yeah.
it's gorgeous. Like I don't talk like that, you know, and for how we typically, you know, think of communities like this and people like Scott and Dina, like we never consider them poets. Like, you know, but they very much are.
I think I do. I think actually I find a lot more poetry with people that kind of have the ability to see life in a, you know, sometimes in a light that we're not participating.
Well,
in.
that's a much more classical way of considering them too. You know, it's like before like the modern era. You know, people like Scott and Dina, the relationship to people like them was more like they were testing the limits of our logic. You know, they weren't necessarily sick or disabled. You know, and like the way culture thought of them was different than it is now. You know, before all of these categories.
We're talking about it inside the church, which is really amazing. And
For
also
sure,
very
I mean,
poetic thing to.
It's like if yeah, like it's you know, I was when we were filming, I was like reading Madness and Civilization because I love Foucault. Like it's like I go to him for everything. You know, History of Sexuality was what I was reading when we were working on Mala Mala, and the really cool thing about you would actually, I'm sure you would love him because like what he does, and it's something that pisses off a lot of academics, but it's something that I love him for is like he kind of like looks at history and kind of conceives of history as this box just like full of stuff, and he's just like pulling things out of it and talking about them in relation to each other in like these ways that you would have never necessarily considered, and then the way that he writes, it's so combustible, you know, because he's forcing these things against each other historically that you're just like, whoa, like I've never thought of it that way.
So can I ask you, when did you first hear that recording? And did you hear it before you decided to make the film about Dina or after? And also, when did you decide to play it against that long shot in Sunset?
So the first time I reached out to he was the assistant DA at the time, like the assistant district attorney who tried the case with Dina. And it was before we really got super deep into production. The film was a bit wider when we started, because like there's a group that she's part of that my dad had started, for his students. He was a special ed teacher, and they still meet bi-monthly, like at like the local library, and that's kind of how we started to shape the film. It's just by going and hanging out and being with them, and you know, even without a camera
She was
sometimes.
alone or with her partner?
Not with the other part. Scott is in the club,
Scott
but
was.
not the other
Right.
man.
Okay.
The other man was just like someone she was casually dating
Really?
after her first husband.
Yeah.
Ah.
And that's why he thought it was cheating, but it was more like she was, you know how people just
Yeah.
love and date around,
Right.
and he just couldn't handle that emotionally.
When they had broken up, and like Dina was upset because he was upset, so she was like, "You can crash on my couch, like whatever you need," and what like, you know, I mean, the relationship, like the details of it are just as gruesome as the call, you know.
So
So I hit up the DA and I was like, "Yo, like, can we talk about this case and whatever?" And you know, because in Pennsylvania, you can't request a 911 call. It's like it's a state by state policy. In New York, they're very easy to get a hold of. Pennsylvania, no. So I wrote to him and I was like, "Can we talk about the case? Like, if you have any documents, I'd love to see them. Like, I just want to, you know, understand what exactly happened." And he met with me, and the case had been so traumatic and had affected him so much that he kept all of it like on the desktop of his laptop.
Wow.
And not to like listen to it all the time, but I think as some sort of reminder of who Dina was, you know. And I remember like we met in his office and he pleaded and I was trying to like retain some sort of semblance of like professionality, you know. So I really didn't. I tried really hard not to react, and then I remember then he like gave it to me on a thumb drive, and I got in my car and just like lost it. And it's the talking about the call still like obviously it always it makes me super emotional because I didn't know how to work with it initially. Like we had no clue. We just had the call. And
So when did you decide to, or let's say when you, and I'm kind of on purpose getting into the details just because it's interesting to me, I also in my film has a recording of a girl in my film that I discovered actually probably 3 years after filming. Only I had the recording of her having to decide and choose between her father and her mother after her father was blamed for abusing her mother, and the court had to
it's a
speak
crazy
to her.
call.
I mean, I'm not comparing it all because it's not at all as crazy
Still
as the call, but
traumatic.
it was very, to me, actually really hard to decide what to do with it because it was after 3 years I was filming under a totally other impression of what happened. So
Right.
I had to shift in the edit everything I was doing because my focus was, I was telling the wrong story. And then I discovered what really happened, at least from another perspective of the mother and the court. So even if I will never know 100% what happened, I had to show that perspective too and shift a lot of things. So I guess my question was, when did you decide to put it on that conversation of them? Because you filmed them talking on the bench to each other. Did you know they're going to talk there? Did you ask them to go and have that conversation somewhere?
We just went, the premise of going to that sunset was just as part of their honeymoon.
So you said, hey, let's go and film you guys talking on this bench?
The most magical thing
or
about
they
that,
just said, hey, we just want to go sit
So
on the bench.
the distance of the shot is we're hiding behind the camera and
Right.
they're lost, so we're hearing from how
Right.
far away it is. And when that couple walked by in the thing, that sparked, all this stuff in Dina. There's a moment where the couple
Yeah.
walks and
Yeah.
they hold each other's
Well, you
hand.
shot it with one camera, right? So like at first you were closer to them, because there's closer shots where they're
Exactly,
sitting
we
on the
just
bench.
literally picked up and ran.
And then
Yeah.
you
And then-
ran to the past, or you
We moved, we started, we went, we came back.
right, and then you came back and you just get this wide shot and they leave and you stay on it for a long time until the
Yeah.
sunset. But at this point, did you know you're going to put the conversation
No.
over it? No, you just
No.
wanted to stay
No.
until you got
We
the
just knew
sunset.
that it was an opportunity that it was worth recording.
Yeah, the sunset
that-
Because it's a
itself.
natural fade.
Such a
You
beautiful
know?
one. I really, if you guys didn't see the film, I think I really recommend seeing that scene because it's like really an incredible scene. With,
But like
such a
literally,
great
like Antonio and Adam were hanging out probably for like an extra hour, and I remember Scott really wanted chicken parmesan, and I was really stressed about it because I just really didn't want to like let him down. It's his honeymoon, whatever. And we're in the Poconos, which I don't know if you've ever been, but it's
To what?
the Pocono Mountains. It's
Oh,
like it's in
okay.
Pennsylvania, and
I
it's
haven't.
it's cute, you know, but there's not much around. So I was like on my phone, like sweating bullets, like being like, oh, we gotta get this guy chicken parm. And I remember like they got up, walked away, and then like I ran and like got in the car with them, and then yeah, they stood there for probably
Oh, so
another
you
hour.
guys stayed and filmed the sunset where you guys went to get chicken?
Well, I was in the car with like Scott and Dina, just like keeping their day rolling.
We constantly had to like.
Yeah. So I think this is like a great testimony to what documentary filmmaking is because it's really such a good description. Like, what you go get chicken parmesan, you film like
Exactly. No, really.
You're
There's no
person you're
trailer.
filming is
There's
like,
no
hey, I'm
craft
really hungry. Can we
services.
go
Like,
get
it's
chicken
like-
parmesan? And then you go get him chicken parmesan. The other person is like, hey, I'm just gonna stay here and film this sunset. Maybe we'll use it somewhere. And then you decide that's gonna be in the editing the moment you play this whole recording, which turns to be, to me, the most poetic moment and heart of the film that really like kind of makes you never forget this character and get it out of your head and remember what she went through and like how naive she was in the face of pain and like how she
They're
managed
telling each other that
to
they love each
again,
other
yeah.
while she's bleeding out
Yeah.
in the kitchen. You know,
It's
it's like you
incredible.
see the entire cycle of abuse like right
so
there.
So that's a
and
lot
then-
of like what's crazy about making documentaries. I think that doesn't necessarily happen with narratives. You know, like that
No,
kind of
I totally agree.
that kind of the kind of way
It's
where
magic.
life is so incorporated into your filmmaking is very special.
There's something about your film that I want to mention that I kept thinking like what it was about the movie that I thought was that made me connect to it. And I thought what was really interesting is that it's interesting because it's about love that naturally there's going to be trauma in the movie. But in the perspective that you have trauma it's what's interesting in the movie is that it's the thing that stays with them even when love dies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have these relationships and these things and then that leaves, but they're always alone with their trauma. So what I liked about your movie was that it almost, for me, trauma was this positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of this like company that they always keep. And that's what they have. So when she's cooking the soup at the end and she's crying because he's not there to give her the soup, you know, it was like all she has is her pain. And I thought, it reminded me a lot of Dina because Dina, when you look at the movie, it because they don't have sex, people constantly like, oh, is it real? Are they really in love? And people are like, oh, it's not really love, it's companionship. What's interesting is that Dina does share space and time and love with Scott, but her real companion is her trauma. It's what she keeps closest to her, and it's what always is shaping her.
It's interesting because Blake and Joel also didn't have sex. And it's kind of in the film too, not as
Yes,
present,
true.
but
Right.
she's like, yeah, we didn't have sex for 3 months, and he's like, yeah, I'm just the guy
He's like, can we
that
cuddle?
Yeah.
speaking about in my film is a guy that has a bone condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, where your bones are lacking collagen and basically you break them. Like you can sneeze and break your bones, or like anything you do can cause a fracture. So he broke his bones over 200 times. And many times he's in a cast, or he just broke his hip or his leg, and he's always in some form of pain. So he is not very sexual, and he's always on painkillers, and she's a stripper. So she deals with all this like very sexual situations, and then she comes home and they're actually not sexual to her at all, but at the same time the one person she wants to be sexual with doesn't really want to have sex ever almost. And so that woman he's referring to, that when they separate, is like suffers from a lot of the same situation as Dina, because actually it was a huge love for her, even though they didn't have
Yeah.
sex. And
What I want to
and
just,
she also lives with a lot of pain from her childhood and her trauma. Like
and she also has like almost like future trauma, like she's haunted by the what that her life is not going to end up being
Yeah.
what what she wants to be. What I really wanted to tell you is that what I appreciate about it is that something that happens a lot to us with Scott and Dina is that people will be like, okay, so just tell me, do they have sex? Like, and I never want to answer that because
Wow.
people have this obsession that love equals sex.
Right.
And what I kept thinking when I watched the movie, and I brought it to my life, is that if anything for me, love is much more about trauma than sex. And what's interesting is that the girl in your film was a stripper with Joel. Joel's the boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their companionship really is constantly in the conversation about her trauma. That's the thing that his presence in the movie for her is helping her navigate that. And his absence almost lets her to continue dealing with herself, even when he's gone.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think I totally understand what you're saying. I think to me it's like love is more like an opportunity to actually heal.
It's like a workshop
from
or something.
trauma, yeah.
Yeah. Fucking or
Because
not
so-
fucking.
And then, like,
so
you
many
kind of
things,
choose
that's it.
people that share a certain pain with you, but that together you can transcend that.
But I guess the reason I keep thinking that what's cool that they do is that it really highlights it is that it really is about healing.
Yeah.
And oftentimes which is our experience, people will reduce it to fucking,
Mm.
you know, and we'll be like it doesn't matter if Scott is penetrating Dina or not, that's not the center
Right.
of their love.
Right.
Dina met this person at this very specific moment in her life, and it's a new opportunity for her, and it's an incredible opportunity for him after living in his parents' basement for 46 years.
I love talking about this
You know?
in the church too, by the way. Yeah. I
It's-
mean, love is about, but I think love is so many things. I mean, love can be just fucking too for some couples, and then for other couples,
Yeah,
it can be has nothing to do
for
with sex,
sure.
and it's very, because love is such a big word. I mean, you know what I mean. But it's also can be like a state of being. It could be like a spiritual connection that has no physical component. Even
can
though
happen
between
in
two
an
people,
instant
like
and
one
last
person
forever.
can be totally like handicapped and from the neck down, and he still experiences love. Like there's just so
Totally.
many kinds of love.
People
but-
talk about it as a form of insanity, you know?
Right.
That's like somehow designed to convince us to procreate. You know, it's like there are all of these different ways of conceiving it.
Yeah.
And for me, like yeah, it's always like when people ask like if Scott and Dina are like really in love, it's kind of like it's not for me to
That's
to
crazy,
say.
yeah, that you handle that question a lot. And then, I guess
Well, I
didn't
find the
think
film
about
is
it
super
so much.
gendered, I think, in how people respond to it.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a lot harder for men usually to see the tenderness that really exists between
Mm.
them. And that like Dina is searching for intimacy, not necessarily penetration. And that
Well,
there's so
she's
many
also
different
actually
forms.
searching for sexual
She-
penetration, and
Right.
she's looking for all of it. She wants the whole
For
thing.
sure,
She wants
for
the-
sure.
The rom-com.
She definitely asks him to
She
have
wants to
it.
be held, you know, like there
Yeah.
are so many different ways to approach kind of giving her what she needs that they're still negotiating, still figuring out. I think like we all do.
Yeah.
And that also is part of her healing, I think. She wants someone to be kind to her body. You know, like she always
Exactly.
wants, when we hug, she loves, every time we say goodbye to her, she's like, oh, you guys give great hugs.
Aw.
You know, she's so aware of physicality. You
Yeah.
know, because she was neglected for so many years and told that physical intimacy was not for her.
Mhm.
She always says that when she had a crush on someone in 6th grade and touched their hair, they'd be like, Dina, do not do that. That is inappropriate. Almost like the retarded girl is touching the not retarded guy, and that is just creepy. While, you know, girls that were considered normal could just touch any guy's hair, and teacher's not gonna be like,
Wow.
you know what I mean? And like she's just so constantly was used to being told, sex is not for you. Your body, like you're,
Right.
it's a constant. The reason I never promote her diagnosis because it's a constant punishment for her.
Mhm.
You know, it's just trying to separate her experience from her body.
Mhm.
And what's cool with Scott is that she is demanding this from him, but it's also part of this reintegration for herself. She's reconnecting to her
Because
body
he's very
and
safe. He's very safe.
Mhm.
He's very, and actually the fact that he doesn't want it is also safe. And that was also what was safe
I
for
think so,
Blake
too.
in my film, because it was very safe to her to be, she got validated by being a stripper in many ways, because it was the first time she felt beautiful, because she was bullied
that was
for
amazing.
being
Of her.
not
It's empowering.
being ugly and
yeah.
never was told she's beautiful until she stripped. And then at the same time that made her feel very unsafe, you know, so then like that she can't be appreciated and loved unless she's naked and stripping. So but then Joel is actually a very safe option in many ways because he is somebody that doesn't see her in that light.
How did you end up in Alaska?
I chose from the start to do Hawaii, Alaska, and New York. I was like,
So you knew the locations before
yeah, I was kind of like
the
did the
characters.
casting of the places before I did the casting of the people, and then
That's
I kind of.
awesome. Had you been there before? Like, is
No,
it?
I've never
That's
been to
why. Is that
Fairbanks.
why? 'Cause
No, I just kind of wanted to choose 3 places because I lived in America for 9 years and I'm not American, I'm from Israel, and I always find that when I talk about those places, people tell me that they're not considered America. They're like, oh yeah, but that's not America, New Yorkers like are liberal, but that's not America, America is something else. Like, you know, it's like you don't know the middle of America, or whatever, and I'm like, okay, but I'm really actually interested in those places, and I felt they're like a triangle on the map, and each one of them is so different in terms of landscape. And I wanted 3 places I can kind of jump between without saying where I am, and you immediately know where you are and feel like
totally.
you know where you are because of the cue of the landscape.
Right.
Do you guys want to see if anybody wants to ask
Yeah,
us questions? I feel
yeah.
always very guilty if I just talk and not let people. Go ahead.
Yeah, I saw both your films and they're beautiful, so thank you for making them. I'm curious what all of the subjects thought of the films.
Scott and Dina, they love it. Dina especially. Dina is like a self-identified diva now. Who, you know, she. Yeah, I was also talking about this earlier today too, so I apologize if anyone was at the Q&A, but you know, like for them, when we were at Sundance, they were there with us, and it's cool to see. It was a similar thing with Mala Mala too, where they walk into rooms and for the first time in their lives, like they're automatically granted like dignity and respect, and they're not invisible, and people want to approach her and Scott and talk to them and make jokes with them and give them their information and connect on Facebook and like all of this stuff. So it's like all of these different doors are opening to both of them now that they've never really even had access to. So yeah, it's cool to see her come into that space and then also own it. You know, it was fascinating because we brought her to a party, and she walks up to these guys in suits and she's like, "So you're from Sony Pictures Classics? My name is Dina. There's a movie about me at Sundance, and I'm also writing a book." And like they were just like, "Okay, is the book going to be done by the release?" And she was like, "You bet it is." Like it was just like so. Like she had no. She's so disarming, and so she sucks any pretension out of the room right away because she has no problem approaching anyone now, and it's so cool to see that. You know, it's fascinating.
So in my film, there's 3 different stories. So all of them were in Tribeca when we premiered the film, and I guess
Wait, Joel was there?
no, Blake was there, and Mary, who plays the older Blake,
And the family?
and the family, and Will,
Wow.
the surfer. Yeah.
Had they met before?
No, they never met because I was filming always separately.
Cool.
Did Will's son go?
Did what?
Will's son? The surfer
Will's
son?
son didn't come. No, he was.
He's still his...
Oh
They
yeah,
haven't
he's
taken him away
fully
from-
his son. Yeah,
Fully.
yeah, and like he
Wow.
raises him, and yeah, you can go on his Snapchat and just like it's always his son and him doing cool shit together, and it's really fun.
It's amazing. That was
I
amazing.
still watch it when I'm like having a bad day. I'm like, oh yeah, Will is still in the sun,
Oh, that's
surfing
cool.
and drinking coconuts. I wish I was there.
Yeah,
I love
right.
when the girlfriend calls him and is like, give him a coconut. I
Yeah.
thought it was...
If he's hungry, give him a
It
coconut.
was the cutest
It's so
fucking thing.
So yeah, Will is still good, and they're all really good, you know, and I really like the film. Of course, with Victory and John, it was a more complicated thing that kind of like went up and down and up and down. So it was a period where they were very happy with it, then they didn't want to talk to me because I decided to tell it, then they loved it, then they didn't want to hear about it, then they came to the premiere and they thought it was, you know, we actually showed it to them before. they came to the second screening and they really liked it, and then they performed in Tribeca after the screenings. And then after that, Victory got signed with Jay-Z because my friend showed him the film, and now she's,
She's amazing.
Her voice is incredible.
Yeah, so she's now
Good for
recording
her.
her first album.
Good for her. Wow.
On
That's
like
so
Rock Nation.
cool.
And then like now they're actually less in contact with me again, like because now they're kind of famous.
So they're in a relationship to the film though, like they have a relation. It's an
they're
active
so
relationship.
tripping. Like right now, they're like in parties with Jay-Z. Like, I
She's
don't
like,
know
maybe you
where
can come check me out on tour.
they are. Yeah, like us on Facebook. Like, basically, that's our relationship.
That's
right
awesome.
now. Yes.
I'm interested in both of the cases if you work with an editor or do you do the editing completely by yourselves? And if you work with an editor, how that relationship is established and how does it work for both of you?
They work with an incredible editor who's a good friend of mine, so I'll let them answer that in a second. Me, I have a very kind of strange setup where I had my editor assistant on my first film being my editor on this film, but we edited together. So I'm very ADD, like if I'm not doing something, I freak out and go on my phone and eat my thumbs and like, I don't know, look for shit to do, and like I can't just sit there and look at the screen while somebody else is doing something. So I am actually the one that sits on the computer and edits, just so I can focus. And then he sits next to me and like we kind of discuss it as we edit, but we kind of edit together, I guess. And you guys
Our editor is Sophia, and she's one of the 4 essential people to the team that is us. It's Adam, our cinematographer, Dan, me, and Sophia. And the way that it works is that we film, and when we bring the footage, we tell her what we have, what we're excited about, and what we can't wait for her to watch. Then she watches it and she tells us the stuff that was not as cool as we had described. And the cool stuff the cool stuff that she found on herself, on her own.
Yeah.
And then we sit together, and it varies. Sometimes it's super intensive, and like we're literally next to her, and we don't leave her alone, and we're like touching her mouse, and we're like, do this.
And she's like, get out of here.
And sometimes she'll be like, that's what I was gonna do, because we tend to be very much in synchronicity. Or she'll edit a sequence, and then she will come see it, and then we'll workshop it and sit together and talk about it through it until we feel like it's good, and then we continue.
She's an incredible editor. I think she's gonna be one of the most important editors. Like,
Oh, she's
Where is she? In New York? Or?
She lives in New York with her husband, who's a director, Antonio Campos.
she's also an amazing director.
Yeah.
And she edited his last film called
Christine.
which maybe you've seen, and
Premiered
also had
Sundance
like a
last
really
year.
interesting true-false situation where I would
true.
call it, like, because he made a film about this real woman that shot herself in the head on live TV, who was a news reporter in the 70s, and at the same year there was a documentary being made on that same woman with an actress playing the woman that it happened to. And those 2 films came together in Sundance in the
Great.
same year. So, and Sophia edited Christine too.
Sophia is like most people, I guess, who work in film, their work is an extension of who they are. But she watches every single second of it, and I don't know, she was either painting her nails while she was doing it, or sometimes she'll scroll through Instagram, but she actually watches every single thing, which is just, that kind of patience is just a gift in itself.
She's amazing, and she helped me finish LoveTrue, my film, because when I edited my film, I was editing it for a whole year, and then I had a cut that was supposed to be the cut. Everybody said it's finished and it's perfect, and I was like, no, I feel like it's still not there, and I had to leave to New York because I was directing a commercial. So I rented another room in the same hotel that I was in and flew my editor to the hotel with his computer and our computer and everything, set it up there, and then brought Sophia and Antonio and a bunch of friends, and I was like, you guys have to watch this with me and give me some notes, and then I finished editing it in the hotel in Tribeca,
That's awesome.
kind of, and then I don't know, like, I didn't finish it there, but that, like, was the breakthrough that kind of helped me finish it, and Brady, and like a bunch of people that are all, like, kind of friends of ours, and then I flew back to LA and kind of finished it, but it was, like, really helped. She was very, very
She helped
helpful.
you
And
do that?
yeah,
That's
she
good
sat
stuff.
with me for, like, probably 3 days she was with us, but it was just, like, there was certain things that I couldn't figure out about the New York story, because that was my biggest sort of problem with the film, because like I said, I filmed for 2.5 or 3 years thinking I'm filming a certain truth that I discovered after 2.5 years was only told to me from the perspective of one of my characters, and I discovered there was a whole other side to the story that actually makes you wonder if he wasn't lying the whole time. So I had to shift all my editing and focus on a different character, and if you can imagine retelling the story in the editing after not having the ability to shoot anymore. Because once we discovered it, they didn't want us to kind of tell it, or it's not that they didn't want to, but it's like I just didn't feel comfortable to keep
Right.
shooting, because it
Right.
was like all I
Because they're
felt,
in the midst of figuring it out for themselves.
yeah, all I
too.
felt comfortable was to show them what I
Right.
filmed with the mother, who kind of in an interview tells us that actually the father we've been filming have been beating her up since they were married for 20 years. And I only knew the story from his perspective. So I ended up shifting the whole edit to be told from the story of the daughter, because she very much reminded me of how it is to grow up with two parents who both have a very different version of reality, and as a kid you kind of have to make your choice of who's right, but some of it is survival and some of it is, who you identify with, and you never really know what happened, and I just thought that she was a perfect reflection of that ambivalence that I felt as a filmmaker too. So I had to do that shifting in the editing. And Sophia was one of the people that was very helpful to me when I was making that shift. So yeah, it was really cool. She was kind of very helpful because she didn't know all the cuts that we had. She could come to it with fresh eyes and say, yeah, I feel like you can even shift it more towards victory.
Which is so
what I did.
valuable, actually,
Yeah.
to have like super fresh eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she watched all of the footage, and we had probably put an edit together before we brought her physically to meet Dina in Philadelphia.
Oh, she met Dina?
She did. Yeah. I mean, she came down
That's cool.
at least once, maybe twice, and yeah, just to like hang out and then be with them face to face. We did the same thing with the first film too. She flew out to Puerto Rico.
That I remember, yeah.
I mean, she had met Dina at Dan's dad's funeral,
That's true.
but it wasn't, until we started shooting that she was like, oh, that woman from that day.
So your dad passed away while you were making the film?
Both of my parents passed away when we were finishing Mala Mala. Yeah, it was like within 4 months of each other.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was actually kind of like that's the first time Antonio and Sophia both met Dina, because my mom had passed, and
Talk
then,
about symbols.
yeah, and then 4 months later my dad had a severe stroke, and they were divorced, but they had just finalized their divorce after like 5 years of kind of destroying each other in court.
Wow.
And and as soon as he passed away, we moved everything to suburban Philadelphia into his house, so like I could get ready for the funeral and sell the house and all the things that you have to do when a parent dies.
Wow.
And at his funeral, like Dina was there, and as she does, like introduced herself to everyone, and she's a memorable person. It's like you meet her once and you.
I love that scene in the dentist office, like that you guys opened the film with, like anybody saw the film.
I love that scene.
Yes.
Yeah.
Open it.
We were obsessed with getting that scene for so long, and finally we got the courage to call the dentist. And just made it
Why
happen.
were you obsessed with getting it for so long?
We just
Because you never really see a character, I feel like.
we started to realize that
The-
Dina, in certain settings, is just all that she needs is a setting to bounce back from. But it's not about being by herself; it's about her being able to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
And we just thought that it was just so a perfect opportunity for her to just be Dina.
Yeah, I mean, in that moment, she like literally tells the nurse like, I'm gonna buy your daughter rainbow socks because she likes rainbows, and then asks someone else if like they can hold her hand while she's like going through like while she's getting whatever thing done. You know, so it's like in that very short amount of time, you understand who this person is, and it's just someone who's generous and considerate, and also like straight up with their needs. I'm scared and I want you to hold my hand. Like it's
very
so
funny.
Super funny.
Very funny.
So we have like 5 more minutes.
Okay, let's try to do short answers.
I've got a question about, because you guys set up yourself with a certain constraint with shooting on a tripod where the camera never moves, how much directing happened? Because I also noticed, like Alma, there's coverage, right? You get like wide shot.
My rule is that it's never on a tripod.
Yeah, your rule is never on the tripod, but
You don't have a single tripod shot?
No.
You noticed that they
In
had
both of my films, like
had a-
if I see a tripod, I scream.
But also,
what
what are we considering directing? I guess then too.
Like, was there a lot of repetition, right? Because sometimes you had a wide shot, and then you come in for a close up, or were you guys just constantly moving in the room and locking the camera down, and then finding it in the editing?
Yeah, there's definitely constant movement.
We had 2 cameras
Oh, you did?
a lot of the time with us.
Got it.
And I mean, there were a few shots that are like, walking down the street or something that like, it was like, we would ask them to walk down the street again.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, like the scenes, like the meatier parts of the film, like that comes from Scott and Dina, like in real time, which is, I think, what's actually
There's really interesting
craziest
scenes
about
when
it.
they're like get ready to go to bed though, and like they get undressed and like she's with
Totally,
the bra and
yeah.
goes to bed. Like, do you guys kind of say, okay, we want to film you now going to sleep,
Yeah.
do all your shit, and then we're gonna leave, and they gotta come out of the bed and lock after you, or do you just go like,
I
hey,
had-
good
we
night,
had
and like, we
keys.
had a key, and like we just
We had a
like,
copy of
yeah.
the keys by
Yeah.
that point, but we had also spent so many hours in the apartment that we knew how to shoot every room.
So
Like,
they basically fall asleep, and then you guys leave or something. And
yeah, Scott
Right.
is out like a light.
yeah,
He's a
that's
heavy
Scott,
sleeper.
yeah, Scott, I can see.
And
But
he
I
has to-
imagine
and he has
she
to go
would
to
be
work.
like, yeah, let me walk you to the door, and she's
She
like,
always wanted to, but then we would be like, we're good, yeah, we're good, like we're good.
I think one night she just was so tired that she just didn't even say goodbye.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that moment very early on in the production when you decide, like, this is my subject. This is someone who I'm going to spend years making something with. Like, how do you know that, like, this is the person that the movie has to be about?
It's like love.
Mhm.
No, I mean,
Really
like,
is like love.
I'm very much in love with Dina, and not how we typically would talk about it or conceive of it, but I deeply love her, and I think it would be hard to work this intimately and work this closely with someone that we didn't feel that way about. We were on the phone with her today, like it's like our lives with Dina, that they will continue until all of us are dust. So I think it's more that our first film had 9 different subjects, all kind of talking in this weave. But for that film too, I think there is definitely, if not a deep love, then a very, very deep affection for every single one of them.
And,
To use
like,
the analogy, was it love at first sight? Kind
Well,
of, or did you
I-
have to develop-
not really. The way that we did it was that we started making a movie about her club. And to be honest, like, I constantly felt like Dina didn't have the capacity to carry a whole film on her own. And it felt like because all the other characters kind of seemed to exceed her in eccentricity, it felt like they were important to kind of fill in wherever she couldn't sustain the film. But what was cool is that when Dan and me and Adam started visiting her with the purpose of filming, I think what really cemented her was that on our way back, the conversations always grew with more and more questions and curiosities. We actually were directly fascinated with her experience, and every time we learned something, there was something that connected us to go back to. I felt like if that conversation wasn't happening, we would have not felt the need to go back.
Or drifting somewhere else.
If there's a question mark, then you're gonna go back out of curiosity. And there was, the more that you get to know someone, which I guess you would call love, it's like you start to identify with them, and you start to see, you know, when Dina started reading about her book, and it's called I Was Born on the Wrong Planet, she started reading excerpts of it and describing these scenes that are dreamlike and symbolic of how alien she feels. You know, we just had finished a movie about trans people in Puerto Rico, so obviously Dan and me identify with outsiders. So that was just a natural inclination to be like, oh, this is like an ally, a friend, you know, and by starting to connect with her as a real person, I think it's what allowed us to start pulling closer in. Dan found out that she was getting married, and we were having a screening for Mala Mala, and he was like, I was like anxious to jump into another project because I'm always anxious about things. And he was like, I'm gonna do it. Do you want to do it with me? And I was like, fine, let's do it. And then we just started.
I guess for me, it's like I have a few things that I think I always look for in people, but like a certain amount of contrast, you know, like that somebody is not just one thing. Like that they hold a sort of paradox or a sort of
Multiplicity.
yeah, something that I myself really struggle with accepting, that it coexists or something. And like at the same time though, it really is like falling in love because, again, depending on the film you're making, because some people are making something from journalistic reasons and they can film a person they actually trying to persecute in a way. But I think these films that are about love and are about telling stories of people that are a bit of outsiders and things like that, it's definitely being made out of love, and that in that regard you just feel it. You just know that you are fascinated by the person and you want to spend more time with them, and that you have to, you know, stay in their company. So yeah, it was like that too. And also you start filming somebody, I mean there's 2 more couples that I actually filmed that didn't make it into the film, you know. Sometimes
really?
yeah, like there was one couple that I filmed in New York that I really liked, and they had an incredible story, but I felt they were always trying to advertise themselves. Like after a few weeks I was like, these guys think I came to make a commercial for their restaurant, like basically, like, and they're just always trying to plug it in, like it was becoming really uncomfortable. So, you know, I had to kind of step back and say, hey, I really like you guys and you're incredible, but I feel it's becoming too much, I don't know, like it's not working. And it was also like really complicated. They were about to leave somewhere else separately, and yeah. So sometimes, you know, it just kind of, you gotta start filming too and see if the person is really in the right state of mind, and if they're really honest about their need to share their story with the world, or are they just kind of in a reality show mentality when they're like, you know, I'm gonna do this documentary and in the end I'm gonna win surviving the island, you know, and like like rewarded somehow. So yeah.
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you for
Yeah,
being
thank you
here.
so much for coming.